O Lord, help us to see you more clearly, to love you more dearly, to follow you more nearly, day by day. Amen. Please sit. I'm going to tell you a story about three people, or rather three stories about people. The first from our gospel today, a man who's one of these 10 whose name is lost to history. But he did have a name, and he deserves to be called something by us, and so I'm going to call him Aaron today. That's a good Samaritan name from somebody who was probably a good and faithful Samaritan person, coming from the same line of Abraham that the Judeans came from. And as Aaron grew up as a young child, was nurtured and taught to grow in his faith and to love his community, as he was raised by his parents, knowing that someday it would be his turn, that he would have a family, probably have a wife and children of his own, and try to raise them the same way that he was raised. He was probably a farmer or a tradesman, someone who worked the land to care for the community, until one day he started to develop some sort of skin disease. We don't know what it was, but in the medicine of the time, often any number of various skin diseases would have been treated with fear, through lack of understanding and fear of contagion, and so he would have been pushed out of his society, named a leper, and his life would come crashing down around him. Now, a few hundred years prior to that, there was another man, and we do know his name. His name was Naaman, and Naaman was a soldier, a commander in the king's army from Aram. He likewise probably grew up as a child in a land in Aram where they knew they were surrounded by people who were sometimes hostile to them and dangerous, and so he watched as soldiers kept him safe. Maybe his father was a soldier. Maybe he had older brothers. But as he grew up, Aram decided to join those ranks and become a soldier as well, and we knew he did it well because he did rise to that rank of being a commander in the king's army. Until one day, Naaman started to develop a skin disease of his own, and very quickly was in a dangerous path that led the same way that Aaron's did. And his whole life was right on the precipice of coming down around him. Now, hundreds of years later, hundreds of years after Naaman, years after Aaron, today in Chicago, there's another man, and we know his name too. His name is William Alberto Jimenez Gonzalez. He's a member of St. Paul and the Redeemer, an Episcopal church of ours in the Hyde Park neighborhood. Grew up in Venezuela. As a young child, raised and nurtured by his family in Venezuela, and probably had a vision at that time of living in his land and raising his family in that place. But Venezuela had become a dangerous place for him to live. It's the kind of place where if you speak out against the political powers that be, you may find yourself shot dead in the streets by a soldier, where the homicide rate is so high that it would make any American in any city in our country pale. And so William decided to flee, to find safety somewhere else. He left his home and made his journey to America, a long and dangerous journey, probably far longer and far more perilous than any of us would ever have to face. But he made it and started the legal process to seek asylum in our country, to apply to find safety and welcoming and a home in this place. He filed all of the process that he needed to get a work permit so he could legally work here in the United States and contribute to supporting his wife and his children here in Chicago. One day he was working at a Home Depot parking lot looking for work he could do with his hands to contribute, to support, where he found himself assaulted and battered by some off-duty officers who were working as security at the Home Depot. And he filed a suit, and shortly thereafter found himself being taken by ICE agents who stopped him in his car at a cordon, looking at nothing from him but just seeing his skin. And he looked like somebody they should stop. So they grabbed him and they took him from his car, they took him from his home, from his church where no one could have any contact with him, took him out of the state. He's just gone. And William's life came crashing down around him. Now, what these three men all have in common is that all three of these men found themselves in a place where somebody else was in a position to put some label onto them. Unclean, unwanted, illegal, dangerous. Some label that was put on them that meant assigned to all of us to say, you don't have to love that person. They don't have to count. They are outside. And we see the effects that have when a label like that is placed on a human being and it erases a part of their humanity. We see where Aaron found himself living in a land where he had some condition that was probably treatable of some kind. Most in all likelihood wasn't contagious, but yet found himself pushed out and become less than human, to have his own name stripped away and just be called that leper. Naaman found himself right on the precipice of having all the doors to relationship shut, cutting him off as well. He's right there. And William was taken away out of state where his own family, his own church has found the doors to relationship cut off, closed off. Now, the good news is that that's not the end of the story. The good news is that's not the end of the story, because we know that underneath all of those other labels that say this person is less than human, they don't need to count, we know there's one label on them that does matter most, and that's image of God. Each of these people was made in the image of God. And we see in our gospel a miracle happen. A miracle happened when Jesus, yes, heals these people of their skin disease. And that's no small miracle in its point, but that's not the big miracle. He heals all 10 of these people of their skin disease. But then Aaron turns around and he comes to Jesus. He approaches with Jesus knowing that this man is untouchable. That this is a man that being too close to someone who's been labeled unclean makes you unclean too. And Jesus doesn't have to extend himself to Aaron. But he does. He opens the door to relationship back up. That door that had been closed to him is reopened. He sees the image of God in Aaron and restores his relationship. That's the big miracle that happens. Aaron's life had been taken from him and it was restored. And it changed everything. In Haman's case, we see as Haman, he himself dealing with those shut doors of relationships. You mean I could find healing, but I have to go to the Israelites? Those people? He's hesitant, even when he's told that that's where he can find healing. Such the doors of relationship have been shut. But he's finally talked into doing it. And he does experience a miracle. He experiences a miracle where he is healed of his skin disease, but that's not the big miracle. He's healed of his skin disease by going in those waters, but the big miracle is the relationships are restored. Haman is able to go to Elijah, and the door of relationship is opened once again. That had been stripped away from him was restored. His relationship to the Israelites, his relationship to his God. That's the big miracle, and it changed everything. Now, we don't know how William's story will end. But I know I'm praying. I'm praying every day. I know the people of St. Paul and the Redeemer are praying for him every day. And this here, St. James Cathedral, this is William's cathedral. He's one of us. We need to hold him in prayer too. And while he is currently taken away and cut off from relationships, he has not gone to us. And this very last week, our bishop, the Bishop of Chicago, traveled to Michigan to go to the site where he is being held, to be able to look at William face to face and see a fellow human being made in the image of God. And to say, William, I see that you are cut off from us and that door to relationship is closed, but we are right there with you on the other side. And God willing, that door is opened. In the meantime, what can we all do? What can we all do when we are grasping at trying to find the right answers for how we are to respond as people in a very complex world with a lot of conflicting guidance? How are we to decide what's right and what's wrong? What's humane? What's justice? How can we navigate that? How can we navigate that when we are such a diverse and different people? It would be easy to have wedges driven between us. And so here's one thing we can do. One thing we must do is pray. Pray and pray and remember that beneath any of those labels that might be put on one another, that we might even put on others out in that world as we go and we are living our lives, any of those labels of unclean, crazy, wrong, evil, dangerous, any of those labels that get put out there that drive us away from seeing the human in one another, remember that underneath all of those labels, the one that matters most, image of God. Each of us and each of those people, our fellow human beings out there, were made in the image of God. And as we are trying to decide what is the right course of action, we steadfastly here at this cathedral are pledging ourselves towards saying we see the humanity in one another. We see the image of God in one another. Those labels will not stop us from treating one another with dignity and with love to the best of our abilities. And as each and every one of us go out in that world and are navigating how we are going to live our lives, may you pray, may you hold to that same standard, seeing the image of God, letting it open the doors to relationships where healing is possible. Thanks be to God. Amen.